And some sounds, they disappear, right? Where is the H in teller? There's no H. Some of you know that I do a little bit of accent training, some explanations on Instagram, and my handle is, if any of you is interested, Linked English Girl, which I had to put Linked English because that's the course that I developed on this specific subject. And whenever I give people an assignment to where I just do a couple of sentences like this, and I ask people to write what they heard. And it's absolutely incredibly interesting what people hear. Because unlike all of you, teachers, professionals, native speakers, the majority of non-native speakers do not hear what you just heard and wrote. The majority of people, whenever I ask them, teller, they would generally hear something like that. There was a time when I did a phrase, he lives on his own, or does he live on his own? And I had this type, these types of responses, and you know, it was very shocking to me. I mean, not very shocking because I went through it, and after I incorporated this training, which I call Linked English training, into my accent training, and I made it the cornerstone, it became very different. And my students started hearing these things. But before that, they had an issue whenever they heard something like your own, because they didn't know that it was your own. They thought it was something about Rhone. And it was absolutely unusual for them to hear English in this way. So if I were to talk about the main goals for accent training, I would formulate them in such a way. In conventional approach, you work on isolated sounds. You make sure that people pronounce I and E correctly. You improve accent for aesthetic purposes, and that's why a lot of people were saying to me, well, how is it possible to spend an entire class working on pronunciation? It is really difficult, and I used to do that. Obviously, I could read my audience, and I knew how to change activities pretty quickly, but that's all we did. We did isolated sounds the majority of the time. Obviously, I did more intonation training, but it was very difficult for people then to take this and apply that in real life. However, had I taught them everything that I started with from the very beginning, they would have had a different value of pronunciation. They would have seen that pronunciation is not just about aesthetic sounding cool. It's about application. It's about listening comprehension. It's about speaking more clearly and speaking more easily, because you have to agree that saying, tell him I will meet him at the bank, which that's how non-native speakers will talk, is much more difficult and much more work, even for the students themselves, than teaching them to say, tell him I'll meet him at the bank.